happens. So picking up where I left off, if you read the Bible, whether it's the Old Testament, the New Testament, the book of Genesis, if you read the Bible, it says 100% accurately, kingdom versus kingdom, nation versus nation, king versus king, queen versus queen, mother versus daughter, son versus father. Now you have seen at least 30 to 40%, 30 to 40, maybe 55% of that as of right now. See, number four is fighting each other. This video is supposed to just be between 10 to 15 minutes, but it broke into two parts when it wasn't supposed to, and it's because whenever it gets hot outside, and if your cell phone goes outside in hot room temperature, it messes up your cell phone for the rest of the day, and it makes it very difficult for you to film, even at nighttime when it's not too hot. So that's like a life lesson learned. Do not go outside when it's between 80 to 85 degrees or 90 degrees, because it will mess your cell phone up, and your cell phone don't know the difference between when it's too hot and when it's cool. Like if your cell phone still thinks it's too hot, it'll keep cutting off until you reboot your cell phone. Not to be putting this in the video, but a lot of people are going to be fighting each other because one person say one small little thing, and as a man or as a woman, you have probably seen fights break out everywhere. You've seen fights break out on the train, at the bus stop, on the bus. You've seen fights break out in the middle of the street, and police have had to been called out 7 to 8, maybe 10 times in 1 month. The police have had to be called out because one man or one woman says one little small little thing, and the person goes off the handles and lose control of themselves and get into a verbal or physical altercation. Like in the 4 to 6 months since we had the accident, a lot of people have gotten into arguments. You had parents and grandparents get into verbal arguments with their kids and grandkids over the most littlest stuff that you possibly could imagine. And the problem is that nobody has nothing to do. You can't go to the gym. You can't go to the movies. You can't go to the nightclub and the bars. You can barely get a haircut. And about 60% of your entertainment is limited. So instead of 100% of entertainment, instead of 80% of entertainment, you've got some 40 to like 60, maybe 65% of entertainment that's very limited. And you're in the house mostly 80% of the time, so you're clouded up in a house where everyone wants to watch movies and television shows. Everybody wants to talk on the house phone and the cell phone, and that's where the problem comes in, because then what happens is your parents and your grandparents pays too much attention to your activities. Whether it's you talking on the house phone, cell phone, whether you're on Tinder. I know a lot of you younger men and women, you be on those dating websites, because I be on those dating websites, and your parents and grandparents pay too much attention to you doing that. Now, it's one thing if you're in high school, then you shouldn't be doing those things. But if you're like in college, or you just graduated college and you're like 24, 25, 26 years old, or you're between the ages of 30 to 34 years old, you should have enough respect to let that person have their own privacy. So a lot of parents and grandparents don't seem to realize they already have too much power and too much control, and having more power and more control just don't make the situation better. It makes it worse, because then what happens is the kids and the grandkids start to rebel more because they feel like you're invading their privacy. Don't be surprised or shocked that one day your parents or grandparents gets access to your password and find out what you be doing on your cell phone, or hacking in onto your cell phone, because this is the digital age now, people. You got parents and grandparents, mothers and grandmothers, fathers and grandfathers that stick their nose where it really doesn't belong, and start hacking in on people's cell phones and listening to cell phone conversations, house phone conversations, looking at your emails, trying to see what type of men or women you be talking to on Tinder. And that's like a huge level of disrespect. And basically, it's the older generation that pays way too much attention to the younger gen. Like, other words, when the crisis is over, I can guarantee you 99.999%. If you're from the age of 18 to 35, you're probably going to move out of your parents' or grandparents' house and get your own house or your own apartment. And it's going to cause some grudge that might last 10, 15, 20 years. Because what man or woman wants to come home from work or come back from hanging out for 2 or 3 hours in an area and your privacy has been invaded? Like, okay, it's one thing if the police, the FBI, and the CIA do it because it's for our protection. But when your parents and grandparents start getting access to your information on your cell phone, listening to cell phone conversations, basically your home conversations, your emails, and trying to see what men or women you're talking to on these dating websites, that's rude and disrespectful. That's like, you get some mail with your name on it and somebody opens your mail, that's a sign of disrespect. And that's what's going to cause the confrontation to be worse. It's going to make it 5 to 10 times worse because you're not respecting these people as young adults. So if you're in your 20s or 30s being disrespected, it's because the parents and the grandparents have way too much time on their hands and you're not able to open your mouth and voice your opinion. That means you could be watching my YouTube videos right now, and then 3 hours or 6 hours later, or 3 days later, or 2 weeks later, you can watch my YouTube videos and get all this information from me. And guess what happens when you get all this information from me? You get into an argument with your parents and your grandparents because the information that I'm giving you is 100% accurate. Because I guarantee you, when it's over, a lot of y'all are just going to save up anywhere from $10,000 to $15,000, and it might be 3 years later, it might be 5 or 6 or 7 years later, you will move out of your parents' and grandparents' house, and you will get your own house and your own apartment, and some of y'all will not want to talk to your parents and grandparents no more. Just the idea, if you're between the ages of 30 to 34 years old and you're being treated like you're back in high school and college, is very rude and disrespectful. It's like being 40 years old and telling your parents and grandparents, is it okay if I go play outside? That's the level of disrespect on the trajectory that we're headed to because of what we're witnessing. And if you read the Bible, what does the Bible tell you? The Bible tells you that you will get into arguments with your parents and your grandparents. I'll be going from to the store, and what do I hear? I hear an older Latino woman and a younger Latino woman arguing about the littlest thing that you can argue about. Sometimes I'll see a husband and a wife argue, or a guy where they're in a relationship, a boy and a girl argue in a relationship over the littlest stuff. You get agitated over a lot of stuff. Like, you look in the news and you see how celebrities get divorced, right? Because they've been in a house for 4 to 6 months and they get tired of seeing each other. Then they start instigating. They get on the phone and talk trash to another person on the phone and don't think the other person can hear you on the phone. That's where the level of disrespect is. Coming in at number 3 is disorder. Now, if you are someone that have a learning disability, it's not a laughing matter. It's not a joke. I have friends that I went to high school and college with from 14 years ago that have a mental illness where they have to take medications because they're having trouble being 100% fully functional. They have a job, they have a house, they have an apartment, they make money, they pay bills. They're human beings just like everybody else. They have feelings and emotions just like everybody else, and they have a right to voice their opinion. Doesn't matter if it's 100% correct or if their opinion is 100% wrong, they have a right to express how they feel, good or bad. So, a lot of people who are 100% healthy, right? Any man, any woman right now can have a mental disorder, a mental breakdown. It could be because you got fired from your job, you lost your job. It could be that you're not able to make no money at the time. It could be that people are making fun of you or bullying you. Any man, any woman, young or old, black or white, can have a mental breakdown. It is very common to be 100% in good health. Everything goes in the right direction. And then from out of nowhere, you start to suffer the symptoms of, cold depression. And usually that's going to be, so if you already have a mental disorder, that's already bad. But for the people who have never had no bad history of it, don't be surprised in the next 5 or 10 years from now that there be talks about people who never had a mental disorder now has one. Like, I'm not talking about stuff like Asperger's and autism. I'm not talking about those disorders. I'm talking about the ones that, this person's got stage 1 or stage 2 depression, or this person is bipolar. I'm talking about that level of mental disorder. You're going to see it go from 10% to like maybe 35, maybe 45%. And it's going to be people who's already up in age, people who's already in their 50s, late 50s, early 60s and 70s. It's going to take its toll on them mentally, physically, and emotionally. And they're going to get it faster and quicker because they're not at work. They're retired and they're not able to get the help of a doctor on what to do and what not to do doing a mental breakdown. So they're going to be the ones to get it. And what's going to be the sad reality is that they're not even going to be aware that they have a mental disorder. Like, for an example, let's say everybody goes to lunch and dinner, right? And let's say that one person forgets to put their plate in the kitchen and they do it a total of 5 times in 4 months, and you always have to clean up after them. Well, at that point, you're either going to argue they're lazy or there's something going on. Or let's say they wake up at, let's say they, let's say they wake up at 1 o'clock in the morning and they call Domino's Pizza. Well, they call Domino's Pizza at 1 o'clock in the morning. That's going to give off 7 red flags that something's wrong because you order Domino's Pizza at 1 o'clock. It makes sense to call Domino's Pizza at 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, or 10 o'clock. But when you do it at 1 o'clock, there's something going on there. Or they talking to themselves in the restroom, or they get in the car and they drive up the street, down the street, but they're not going nowhere. That could be a big major sign that that man or that woman who's in their late 50s, 60s, or 70s are suffering from the first stage of a mental illness. They have a mental breakdown. They call it a mental episode, meaning they're not even aware something's wrong. Like, they'll look 100% normal to you because they can carry a strong social conversation. They look healthy, but and it's not until you either catch them by themselves or you notice their behavior just is just weird and strange. That's when you know they got a mental disorder. And I'm talking about people that's in their late 50s, 60s, and 70s. People in their 20s and 30s will also get mental disorders that never had mental disorders because you're not going to be used to the isolation and you're not able to have that entertainment that you used to have from before. Coming in at number 2 is social disorder. Social disorder is something completely different from a mental disorder. Social disorder means you either used to have the ability to talk very sociable to people, like when you went to the nightclubs or the bars or the park or the beach, and then you went from having the ability of being outgoing to being what they call an introvert, which means you're now introverted, which means you're closed off, you're isolated. You don't like to be with big crowds, you don't like to talk. And as soon as somebody says something that you don't like or you don't want to hear, you don't want to be bothered. And you do that for 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 weeks, people are going to see this 7 red flags right there. So a social disorder is actually going to be even worse than a mental disorder because you're going to basically think it's normal and okay to be isolated and not want to talk to people because when you were sociable, you didn't know how to find fun activities to do. So that's going to be a big challenge. And I would say in the next 5 to 10 years, it's going to become a big subject and a big topic on YouTube. No one's talking about it right now, but eventually people will. Coming in at number 1 is The Future of Us. Now, I did say at number 4 that a lot of the people are going to eventually contemplate their future. What I mean by contemplate your future, I mean that there's going to come a time where one day you're going to finally get a house or an apartment, you're going to get a car, you're going to get a new job, and then you're going to move out of your parents' or grandparents' house because you keep getting into arguments over the stupidest, littlest stuff. And let's not forget evasion of privacy. That means if you make YouTube videos like I make YouTube videos, and your parents or grandparents pay too much attention to you making YouTube videos, you're going to want to get your own house or your own apartment because you want your privacy to be respected. And basically, I predict in the next 5 to 7 or 8 years, or even 10, that 60% of y'all, when y'all graduate from high school and college, a lot of y'all just gonna get 2 jobs, save up $10,000 to $15,000 cash, and just move and get you a new house and a new apartment, and don't say nothing to your parents and your grandparents because every little thing you say or do, it escalates into an argument. Like if someone doesn't want you to hear their cell phone conversations, and I already touched on it at number 4, that is, you're going to be angry and upset because they had no business listening to what you were saying. You're going to want to move out, and you're not going to want no one to be trying to listen to your, like I said, if you're between the ages of 30 to 34 years old, or if you're 40, that's going to come off as rude and disrespectful because most millennial men and women are going to look at it like, I'm not in high school, I'm not in college, I'm an adult, and you're going to respect me as an adult whether you like it or not. And if we can't come to no agreement, it's going to cause an argument. It's going to cause confrontation, and nothing good comes out of confrontation. A lot of bad, but no good. And then people are not going to want to go to family reunions. It'd be like 10, 15 years later before you start talking to your parents and your grandparents. Because you're hearing so many arguments that a lot of people are starting to get angry and agitated on the circumstances that's happening. So let's recap back because this video broke in half. Number 5 is the storytellers of fearmongers. Let me put number 5 in here because I'm gonna delete the other video because I don't want this to be between 35 to 40 minutes. I promised y'all and I guaranteed y'all that this video should be between 10 to 15 minutes, 20 minutes at the most. Number 5 is going to be storytellers. That's going to be fearmongers. That means the disenfranchised. What's another word for the disenfranchised? People who work their whole entire life to achieve a certain level of success, and they try to do it in 10, 15, 20 years, or extreme cases, 25 to 30 years later, and they see you accomplish the same thing in half the amount of time. People who are disenfranchised, they think negative. Like you have people who think positive, right? They think positive 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. Well, you have another group of negative people who are disenfranchised that think negative all day, every day. They just think it's the end of the world. No good can come out of nothing. And they think negative 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. Now, I'm not trying to pick on any group of people, but I'm recapping number 5 to put it in the video. So you don't be going, what's number 5? Because I gave you number 4, number 3, number 2, and number 1, but I never gave you number 5. So I'm giving you number 5 now. Basically, they are disenfranchised. You get 2 clashes. You get the baby boomers clashing with the millennials. I would be what they call a millennial because I was born January 1986. Even though I say I'm an 80s baby, they want to include people that were born in the 80s and the 90s and the 2000s. They want to lump us into one category and call us all millennials, which is rude and disrespectful, which shows you that they don't have no respect whatsoever. But my point is, it will be the baby boomers versus the millennials because the baby boomers worked their whole entire life to achieve a certain level of success. It took them 10, 15, 20 years, extreme cases, 25 to 30 years to get that. And in that time, they never got the respect or the recognition that they rightfully deserve. And you might pull that off in 5 or 7 years, and they be trying to figure out how is it that you're going to accomplish that in half or not even half the amount of time. And they don't attack people that are failures. That's the one thing I've learned in my 14 years. They don't attack failures. They attack people of success. So if you're a success, most likely you're going to get attacked. Now, I'm not trying to say all baby boomers. Please don't misconstrue what I say. Don't take my words out of context and then attack me because I'm speaking my mind intelligently. I'm just telling you I watch and I observe good and behavior of both generations. I don't see the millennials better than everyone. We have our flaws. We make mistakes. I make mistakes. And I see the baby boomers have done some great stuff in history, and I see they made some mistakes too. So nobody's perfect. So I don't want no one to say that I said that one generation is better. It's not who's better generation video. This is called Sex Game 2020 Report, and the reason why it's being called that is to give you my personal assessment on what I think is going on in 2020, because the very next YouTube video that I do make is going to be the 2020 presidential election. That's going to be the very next big video. Now, before this video even gets uploaded onto YouTube, I'm going to do a thing called print screen. Print screen means, like, before any movie can go into the movie theaters, it has to be screened by executive producers at the Hollywood Guild Association. That means it's to determine if the movie's PG-13, is it rated R, is it rated N-17, is it rated X, before it can be put into the movies. Same thing with television. Before any television show can be put on primetime television or on cable, it has to go through a committee to see if it's appropriate for mature audience. Well, I'm going to send it to my producer, and he's going to pick out the good stuff I said in the video, the over-the-top, highly critical stuff, and he's going to write a piece of paper down, and he's going to highlight the stuff that he thinks is too critical to come out of the video. And if he likes everything in the video, it stays in the video. But if I have to redo the video over, and I guarantee there's probably a 60% chance that I might have to redo the video over because he's going to tell me his honest opinion, good or bad. So that's going to be a video you're going to want to watch. So this was just to kind of highlight the 5 reasons. Until next time, peace.